Hello, everybody. I'm very excited for this webinar. It is inspired by EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the EOS tools is called the 8 cash flow drivers. Now, this is typically taught one-on-one and not in a group setting, but I wanted to really kind of unpack this concept because this was a big kind of game changer once I taught my leadership team this. And ideally, this is information that if you do have a team, you do have, program directors, chief instructors, things like that, that you want to bring to them. But first, we've got to learn it. Okay. Grab a pen and paper. I do have a document that I will give you at the end, but I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, make sure I've got the keynote up, and we are going to dive in to the 8 cash flow drivers for martial arts. Okay, in the chat, curious, anybody ever had like a high revenue month, but it really didn't feel like anything was left over? So maybe like top line revenue felt really good, but when you looked in your bank account, there wasn't a ton of money left over. And I will, I'll be the first person. I'll say yes. Miss Chapman says all the time. Well, we don't want it to be all the time, but it can happen, right? Um, I think this is a pretty generalized statement, but I'm going to stand by it. I think for the most part, um, all of us have some room of improvement in terms of education in regards to the numbers in our business. I think all of us can do a better job at tracking, at analyzing, and then at taking action steps based off of the numbers that we see. And I think all of us would like to improve the profitability in their school. So give me a big yes if you would like to improve the profitability in your school.
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go. Very cool. All right, we got some big yeses here. So, as always, guys, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for participating. Time, it's the one thing we can't get more of. So, I greatly appreciate it. My mission today is really just to help you simplify what drives money in your school. And I'll show you 8 specific levers that you can pull to improve cash flow in any season. And yes, we're talking about money. For some reason, money and being successful in the martial arts taboo. You get called names like McDojo. And look, um, for many of you, you have been on this journey for decades, and the same amount of time that it would take to become a doctor, or become a lawyer, where you're making really good money, you've spent that same amount of time honing in on your craft. So if you're one of those people that think you shouldn't be making money from a martial arts school, it's probably not the webinar to be on, and I won't take it personally if you hop off. What I do want to say is that we do need to have the understanding that you have to have a great product and you have to have a great service, right? If you don't have a great product and a great service in terms of what you are delivering on the mat, this is going to be very difficult. All right. So I am just kind of coming to this with the understanding that you do offer really amazing, life changing, transformational classes in your martial arts school, and not just classes, but you have a full program that helps you to do that. Okay. So we're going to break this down, talk a little bit about the money mindset that you need to have. Speaking the language, we're going to talk about 5 really important numbers that you need to know. We'll then dive into the 8 cash flow drivers, and then 5 fast moves that you can immediately do to drive more cash in the business. Okay. As always, be present, take notes, ask questions. I'm monitoring the chat. I will get to them when it makes the most sense. So, the job of the leader is to obsess about and improve profitability and cash flow. You started a business. Okay. Yes, it's a martial arts school, but it is ultimately a business. And it is your job to obsess about the profitability. And, a couple of my favorite kind of quotes around this is that revenue is vanity, net is sanity, and gross feeds the ego, net feeds the family. And I learned that lesson very hard. I started, and actually, this is kind of cool. I started Gracie Pack. Yesterday was our 13-year anniversary, which was also the day that I got my BJJ black belt. So the timing is really cool. And I started Gracie Pack inside of a 24-hour fitness center called Cultas. And I subletted their Zumba room. So we turned their Zumba room, which was maybe 1,200 square feet, into the school. And all in, from rent to electric to internet to everything, I was spending about $1,000 a month. I mean, just think of that kind of low overhead. I didn't have to clean the toilets. I didn't have to, sweep the floors, take the trash out. All of that was handled by them. And I had this opportunity to move 2 blocks down the road into a 12,000 square foot facility. Would we all agree that that is a very large facility for a martial arts school? 12,000 square feet. It was 2 stories. It was formerly a dance studio. So if you think the build out for a dance studio, very similar to what a martial arts school would need. And at the time, I probably had about 120 students. Again, really low overhead and decent top line revenue. But I got it in my head that I wanted to launch an after school program and summer camps, and the bathrooms in the 24-hour fitness facility was shared. And I thought that there were safety issues with, you don't know who's in those bathrooms because it could be anybody that's working out in the gym. So it wasn't really an ideal setup for after school and summer camp. So this opportunity came to me, and again, I'm only spending about $1,000 in expenses. And the landlord said, "How much are you paying in rent?" And I said, "Andy, I'm paying about $1,000." And he goes, "Well, tell you what, I'll meet you at the $1,000 for the 12,000 square foot facility, and every quarter will go up a little bit. So first 3 months you pay $1,000. Next 3 months we'll bump it up to 2,000, and we'll slowly increase it until you get to $7,500." And that was like years down the line. And he said, "The only thing is you got to handle um, all of the maintenance of the building and any changes that you want to do inside." Now, this building had been vacant for years. When we came in, we had to set off like 20 different cockroach bombs to get all the cockroaches out of it. And we put a lot of money into improving the facility. And I had this beautiful 12,000 square foot facility, 2 floors. We had one, two, three, 4 training rooms. Everybody had an office. Like, I had an office, my wife had an office, program director had an office, instructor had an office, just because we had so much space, right? And I remember, growing the after school program and growing the summer camp. We got, the 4 vans. We're picking up at 7 schools, summer camp, 100+ campers, and getting to the point where it cost $30,000 a month just to break even. And that is the example of gross feeds the ego, net feeds the family. Because when I was in the smaller location, I was probably bringing in around 18 to $20,000 in revenue. And how much were my expenses? $1,000. That's a really, really great net profit that I was bringing in. And I think one of the big lessons there was bigger is not always better. I don't regret doing it because I always would have wondered, but we eventually moved from that facility into where we're currently at now, which is a 5,000 square foot facility, which I think everybody would agree. Is that a sizable facility for a martial arts school? 5,000 square feet, for sure. You do a lot of things in 5,000 square feet. So I really learned that lesson. And, I joke around. At the end of the night, there were 17 trash cans that had to go outside to the dumpster every single night. Think about how many trash cans you got to take out right now. I had to take out 17 every single night. And it was just, it's just a really great reminder to me that gross feeds the ego. Those top line revenue numbers, you see everybody, that's what they want to beat their chest with. I have 500 students. I know schools that have 300 students that make a lot more money than schools that have 500 students. And that's why this is so important. I want to tell you one more story before we kind of dive in, because I think this is really impactful as well. I'm part of a mastermind group called Seven Figure Agency, and it's a mastermind for agencies, right? Like if you're part of Maya, it's the Maya for agencies. And they have an award that they give out at the end of every year called the Seven Figure Agency Award. And when I joined 5 years ago, I made it one of my goals to become Seven Figure Agency of the Year. And I literally have it on my vision board. And I've had it on my vision board since 2020 when I joined the program. Now, I have still yet to win. What is really interesting, last year, the company that won, and the way that they do it is based off of top line revenue. That agency brought in around $8 million, but they were at 5% profit. Okay. The agency that won the year before was at around $9 million and was not a profitable agency. Now, just think about that. I set this goal, like, I want to win this award. Top line revenue doesn't matter if you're not taking anything home. And that's what today's conversation is all about. And while I still do want that award, I like collecting awards. I think it's just from competing in tournaments as a kid. You get your medals, you get your trophies. The award doesn't mean as much to me now, knowing that there's these gigantic agencies doing this crazy top line revenue, but I'm making more money being a little bit bigger than half their size because I've got my numbers dialed in, which is what we're going over today. Okay. So let me go back to the screen share. Hopefully that kind of puts a little exclamation point on the importance of what we are going over. So let's start with speaking the language. Okay. I think when you start talking finances in a business, it's like, man, I didn't go to school to become an accountant. It can feel very, very overwhelming. And the reality is you don't need to be a finance expert. You just need to speak the language of business, and some vocabulary that you need to know are going to be in these next five numbers that we talk about, which can be found on your income statement, which is also called your P&L, your profit and loss. Okay. And it really just shows how much money your school made or lost. And you should be looking at this on a monthly basis, not, on just a quarterly basis. So you want to make sure you're looking at this on a monthly basis. And I put a picture of a scoreboard here because, I want you to think of it like your financial scoreboard. It basically tells you if you're winning, if you're surviving, or if you're losing. And this document really answers one big question, which is my school actually profitable? Okay. And I waited way too long in my entrepreneurial journey to focus on profit. I was so focused on top line revenue. So here are the five numbers that you should know. And some of these numbers we don't talk a lot about in the martial arts industry in particular, but are very prevalent in other industries. And I think it's important that we learn from other industries. So you have your revenue, which is the amount of money that you bring in. And then you have your cost of goods sold or cost of services sold. Now, for us, it's really cost of services sold because we are a service based business. And what your COGS or COSS is what it costs for you to deliver. And this is a number that most martial arts schools are not familiar with or not tracking. Now, once you know how much you brought in, and then how much it costs to deliver, your GPM, which stands for gross profit margin, is what is left over for you to work with. Okay. So you've got your revenue. We then subtract what it costs to deliver, and whatever is left over is called our gross profit margin. From there, you have expenses, and that's really what it takes for you to run your academy. Once you've taken the revenue, subtract what it costs for you to deliver, look at what's left over, and then subtract the amount of expenses. You are then left over with your net operating income, which is what you keep. Okay. So trying to take, a kind of what can feel like a very complex subject and boil it down to these five numbers that you should be keeping a close eye on. Okay. So what I think most schools track is the tuition collected, right? How much revenue, and that should just say revenue collected, not tuition, because tuition is only one of the levers of money you should be pulling. The expenses that are left over, and then what's left in the bank at the end of the month. And it doesn't really give you a clear picture on what it actually costs you to deliver your service. Okay. So when we talk about gross profit, taking the revenue from services, so the cost that it takes to deliver those services. So when you think about like what costs are directly tied to you running classes, well, it's typically instructor payroll or class coverage pay, right? So if you have salaried instructors or hourly instructors, or maybe you pay by the class, which I wouldn't recommend, that cost is tied directly to you running the class. Maybe you have assistants, bonuses, or stipends, right? Like, hey guys, if we hit a certain student value or reach a certain revenue, we're going to give bonuses out. If you pay any curriculum licensing fees, right, you would tie that into the cost that's directly tied to running the class, and any paid help used to deliver your core program. And it's pretty rare that I see martial arts schools actually tracking this aspect of their financial health, because without tracking this, you really don't know how much money you keep every single time you sell one of your core programs or your core service, which is your student membership, right? So I'm just going to use easy math. Let's say your basic program is $150 a month. My question is, well, how much does it cost you to deliver? And how much are you keeping after that $150 for that student? Most people don't know. And we'll talk about the percentage that you should be aiming for here in a minute. Okay. So these are your costs of services sold. I want you to think of it as the cogs of your service business, right? Like if we were in a company that sold, let's say we sold t-shirts, well, there is a cost of those t-shirts, right? We have to buy the t-shirts in order to be able to sell them. So that's where this concept of cogs comes in. Because we're a service-based business, we call it costs of services sold. Okay. So why should you track this? Well, one, if you're just to figure out if your programs are profitable. You might be losing money every time a student trains, especially if your pricing isn't where it should be. It also will tell you how scalable your business is. Can you add more students, or will costs just rise just as fast? And it can also let you know where your cash is leaking. Maybe you do have high payroll or too many classes with too few students. So how do you track this? Step one, just know how much your revenue is. So pick a time frame monthly, and I would look at August, right? Because we're only 9 days into September, and look at how much revenue was brought in August. And let's say you brought in $25,000 in revenue this month. Okay. Then you're going to add up the cost to deliver. And you only add the expenses directly tied to running classes. Okay. So that could be instructor pay, that could be assistant pay. Maybe you have curriculum fees that you pay. In this examples, the cost of services sold was $7,500. Okay. And then what we're going to do is just subtract to get our gross profit. So we take the revenue, we subtract the cost of services sold, and this gives us $17,500 of gross profit. You now just found your margin for delivering your service. The next step here is, again, guys, this is all just simple math. We haven't done anything but subtraction so far, right? We're going to step it up a notch and do a little bit of division. And now we're just going to take the gross profit, which was the 1750, and divide it by our total revenue, which is going to give us a percentage, which is our gross margin. And in this case, it's 70%. And this is telling us we are keeping 70 cents on every dollar before we have to even touch expenses. This is an example of a healthy business. Okay. If you were only keeping 40 cents of every dollar, got to remember there's still other expenses that are going to be coming out. We haven't even touched rent yet, right? Or any of the maintenance aspect or any of your softwares that you are paying. Okay. So, understanding your gross margin can just kind of give you a better picture of the health of where your business is and how much money you are actually keeping for every dollar that is owned. Now, yes or no in the chat, do you have a program director? Let me know, yes or no in the chat. Do you have a program director? So, a couple of no's, yes. Well, actually, more no's. Interesting. Okay. Okay. All right. So it's probably about split here. So I do want to touch on, well, what about program directors? Because could you argue that your program director should be part of your cost of services sold? Here's how you want to kind of make the determination. Should you include it if they're on the floor regularly assisting with classes, events, testing, and gradings, like graduation ceremonies, things like that. So if your program director is involved in either they get on the floor for classes, they're helping with the events, they're showing up to the testings and the graduations, you could consider adding them to cost of services sold. If they are involved in onboarding your students, if they're involved in any aspect of retention and upgrades, then you would include them in cost of services sold. If they help run things like birthday parties or camps or P&Os, then you would include them. And if their primary mission is servicing the student experience, then you would also consider putting it in there. Now, most schools that do have a full on program director, you're probably saying, like, yes, they do that. Maybe not on the floor assisting with classes, but with events and testings and graduations. And yes, they onboard new students and they help with retention. Then more than likely, the answer is going to be yes. If you have somebody that is strictly like admin level work, almost like secretary level work at your front desk, then I would not consider putting them in the equation of cost of services sold. So if they're just administrative with like scheduling and answering phones and doing office tasks, which to me is more like an office admin than an actual program director, then you would put their salary in your operating expense account. Okay. So just want to make sure everybody's clear on those two things. And it's just because everybody's model is a little bit different. You saw about 50% of you have program directors, 50% of you don't. If you have more of that admin person, well, then you would just put them in the expense section. You're not going to count them in the cost of services sold. If that makes sense, can you guys just give me like understand or good to go or something like that? Because it is different for every single school. Let me know, like, are we good with that? Got it is fine. Good. Okay, cool. So everybody's formula is just going to be slightly different depending on what your program director or admin person does. Awesome. Cool. You guys rock. Okay, so what's the right move? If they wear multiple hats, this might be another situation you find yourself in. You could also just say 60% of their salary is going to go into the expenses, and then 40% could go into cost of services sold. I don't care how you do it, just be consistent. Either keep them consistently in the expense section or keep them consistently in cost of services sold. For most of you, your program director is going to be in cost of services sold. Okay. Bottom line TLDR here. If the role is tied to delivering the promise to the student, it belongs in cost of services sold. If the role is about running the business behind the scenes, it belongs in your operating expense. Okay. And this way you can have a clear understanding of what your gross profit margin is. All right. So, what is a healthy gross margin? And I know for some of you, you're going to have to go back. You're going to have to look at your P&L. You're going to have to crunch some numbers to figure it out. So, you probably don't have this number in front of you. But what a healthy gross margin for a martial arts school. And this is different from industry to industry. Okay. In a digital marketing agency, we say 66% is a healthy gross margin. For a martial arts school, 65 to 75%. That means you're keeping most of the money you earn from delivering classes. Okay. If you are below 60%, when you run your numbers, it's time to either raise prices, which we're going to talk about, cut instructor hours, consolidate class times, or improve efficiency. So, this is the number I want you aiming for, this 60 to 75%. It really means you're keeping 65 cents to 75 cents on each dollar you are making. Okay. Cool. I'm not seeing any questions here. All right. Um, just a reminder, you're not just teaching martial arts, you are selling a service. And if you don't know what it costs to deliver that service, you don't know if your business is truly working or if it's working as efficiently as it can be. Okay. So those are those five numbers I really want you to dive into. What we're going to switch to now are the 8 cash flow drivers. And this is kind of taken more from EOS here, but part of the activity that I take my clients through is three different steps. And the first step is we define the primary drivers of profitability and cash flow in the business. So that's what we're going to go through when we do the 8 cash flow drivers. From there, we assign an owner for who is accountable for each one of those cash flows. Now, if you have a small team or if it's just you, you're a one man, one woman machine, then you are the one held accountable. But for a lot of you, you said you had program directors. I'm sure you have a program director. You might have chief instructors that are helping you. This was a really big unlock for me in my business was teaching my team these are the ways that we drive cash in the business and this is what you are held accountable for in helping us increase profitability in this specific area. I think for most business owners we put all of that weight on our shoulders, and when you have a team they should be there to help you increase that as well. They just don't know about it because more than likely you haven't taught them about it. Okay. And then once we define this is a driver of money in the business, you are accountable for owning that driver. We then set a goal to improve profitability. So, some questions that I ask my clients when I take them through this exercise is, well, what increases revenue in your business? I just want you to marinate on that. You don't need to put it in the chat, but just think about that. What helps to increase revenue in your business? Okay. And then we want to ask ourselves what helps us decrease expenses and what increases profitability. So I would basically have my client take a few quiet minutes, and we do this with their leadership team, and we sit down, we have them write out these are all the different ways we can increase revenue, and these are all the different ways we can decrease expenses, and these are the different ways that we can increase profitability. Typically in a company they're going to have 6 to 12 of these cash flow drivers, but in EOS we just call it the 8 cash flow drivers. So let's dive in. First one, think this is probably the first thing that came through everybody's mind when I asked, how can I increase revenue? Most of you are probably thinking, well, new students, right? And in Maya, we talk about 5 different profit centers. So you're going to see at the top which profit center it may fall in. And in some cases, it falls in multiple profit centers. So the one lever that we can pull to help increase cash flow and profitability is new students. And that's just your ability to track leads and turn them into paying students. There's many different ways you can do that, from your website to paid ads to referral programs to B2B relationships to community events. And there are some metrics that you should be looking at on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis that help you have a good understanding of where that's at. And it really should be your conversion rate of either appointments to memberships, if you do a free offer, or paid trial to membership. And one of the absolute easiest ways is to improve your follow up system. Um, I saw a post from somebody else in the industry that they cold called, like, I don't know, 50 different martial arts schools, and less than 10 of them actually picked up the phone during normal working business hours. I think for the most part, most schools don't have a lead problem, they have a conversion problem. And this really comes down to your follow up system. Okay. So this is one of those 8 cash flow drivers. It's probably the most obvious one because it's the one that everybody wants to talk about. New students, so it's got to be on here. Okay. Our second cash flow driver is going to be your student retention. And this should be just as important of a conversation as new students. And it's just not as sexy. So, people don't typically ask as much, but the schools that really go from good to great are the ones that truly focus on retention, which is how long your students stay actively training and paying, right? So it's also that, okay, we also want them to be paying. And one of the metrics that not a lot of schools know is just how long on average. And if you do know, I think that's awesome. Can you let me know in the chat, on average, how long are you students staying? And if you don't know, just put don't know. Ms. Chapman says 12. What expenses should the leadership team have access to answer this question? That's really good. I'm going to answer that at the end, Ms. Chapman. Ms. Emma says 12 months. Anybody else know? If you're not answering, then I'm just going to assume you don't know. 1 year. Okay. Average about 9 months. Very good. I know that there have been some studies by some of the larger CRMs. I know EFC did one back in the day, and the average was 9 months. I've seen other companies do it, and the average is 6 months. Guys, if you can, if your average is 9 months and you can get that to 12 months, that's 3 extra months of tuition times X amount of students. For many of you, that's adding tens of thousands of dollars to the bottom line. Okay. So this is a number your CRM should be able to pull for you. We keep track of this inside of GrowPro, and for us, on average, our clients last about 20 months. Okay. So now I can say, all right, well, my average client value is worth X amount, and they stay for 20 months. So that means the lifetime value of our average client is X amount. And when you know the lifetime value of a student, then it makes it a little bit easier to determine how much are you willing to pay to get that student, right? If you have a lifetime value of, we'll use 12 months. Oh, I didn't mean to stop the share. Let me pull up my calculator here for you guys. So let's say we had a couple of people say 12 months, and let's say your average student value, I'm going to go on the lower end, is 185. That's not what you charge. It's just what your student value is, which is your revenue divided by your active count. That means the lifetime value of the student is $2,220. Well, let me ask you, if you had a referral fee of $100, would you be willing to give somebody $100 for you to get $2,200? But I think the answer is like, heck yes, I would do that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And this is where just understanding cost of acquisition comes into play. Maybe if you're running Facebook ads and Google ads, and you're doing rack cards and local B2B, and you're doing partners in education, and you find out your cost of acquisition is $150 or maybe $200. Again, are you willing to put $200 in the slot machine to get $2,200 back? Well, if you know they're staying on average for 12 months, the answer is absolutely. Okay. So your retention some action examples to really help you with this, because I find a lot of schools struggle with that onboarding period, which is like those first 90 days, is implementing some form of a check-in system at either the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day mark. And a lot of this can be automated through automations inside of your CRM. And then really thinking about the customer journey, like what do they go through after those 90 days? We at my school, Gracie Pack, we're a BJJ school, so kids cannot earn the rank of black belt. But going to a lot of Maya conferences, we heard a lot of schools kind of struggle once the kid hit black belt, being able to keep them on long term. So in this case, you would look at, well, okay, well, what happens at black belt? What can we implement in that customer journey to keep them coming back for more? Okay. So we usually don't look at retention as a way to increase cash flow, but it absolutely is. The longer they stay, the more that comes in. Next is your tuition pricing and packaging. And this really affects a lot of different profit centers. You've got your new students, you've got your upgrades, you've got retention. And it's not just what you charge, it's how you charge. Okay. And this is a topic that Mr. Mike Metzger is incredibly passionate about. And I know he loves to argue this topic all the time, um, because he believes that the way that they structure packaging with Maya is the absolute best way to increase the profitability in the school. And that's offering different program tiers with different options. And option A is a paid in full, and option B, option C, option D. But your way that you are packaging your tuition can affect your ability to cash flow. Many schools are only collecting, maybe their first month, or they're offering month to month programs, where you might not have that long term success in keeping the student. And look, if you have a month to month program and you have long term retention, I think you can argue, well, like, hey, they're staying and it's because you do have an amazing program. But I am a fan of utilizing a 12-month or 36-month agreement, because I've just seen the success that we've had with our school, because we were one of those schools that did a month to month, and then we did, you could sign up for 7 months and then 12 months, and I had it in my head that nobody would sign up for a 36-month agreement. Can you, yes or no in the chat, do you have a program that is longer than a year-long commitment in your school? Yes or no? Do you have a program that is longer than 12 months? All right, we got some no's, we got some yeses. Interesting. So actually a lot more no's. And I was in that initially, I was in that kind of group of people, like 12 months. Like, man, that's a long time. Do you actually think people would sign up for longer than that with 24 or 36 months? And the answer is yes, they do, because we sold tons of them. And I know, whether you agree with the lifetime, memberships or not, they're out there. People are selling them. People are selling them for $10,000, $20,000. They do work. Right now, here's the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to decide what kind of business you want to run. And I want you to make sure that when you put your head on your pillow at night, you feel good about the decisions that you're making. And maybe you just don't feel good about having, a longer than 12-month agreement. But I'm here to tell you there are schools that do it very successfully. And when you are packaging a 36-month program, it can help increase your retention, and it also can help an immediate increase in revenue, because people are willing to do paid in fulls. Okay. So it's not just what you are charging, it's how you are charging it. Okay. So really kind of thinking back and reevaluating your pricing and what you're doing. Is it a 6 month? Is it month to month? Is it 12 months, 24, 36? And not forcing people, right? Life is better with options. That's one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Mike Metzger, and I agree with that. Life is better with options, and it's why we lean so heavily into the option A, B, C, and D, because I found that our customers liked those options as well. Okay. Our fourth cash flow driver is understanding your student value, which is just the average revenue per student. And what profit centers affect this is your upgrades, your special events, retention, and retail. And it's just how much the average student spends per month beyond the basic tuition. Okay. And this is how you have schools that have 150 students that make more money than schools that have 200 or 250 students. It's because they've cracked the code on student value. And in the past, we really wanted people to kind of be at around $185 student value, but now we're seeing upwards of $200 student value being the norm. All you do is you take your revenue, you divide it by the amount of students you have, and that's going to give you your student value. And oftentimes, that number can actually be lower than what your cheapest base package is. So we see this all the time where, let's say they say we charge $150 a month, but their student value is 125. How can your student value be lower than what your base package is? If you know the answer, put it in the chat. How could that be possible that the student value is lower? Let's say it's 125, but your base package is 150. Very good, Mr. Sweeney. Ding, ding, ding. Family discounts. Okay. And we're going to talk about discounts here in a second. Okay. So, your program shouldn't just be offering classes, it should be offering additional value, right? It's not just, wow, we're trying to make more money. No, we're providing you with more value through either upgrade programs or leadership programs, whatever you want to call them, offering private lessons, selling gear, doing events. And one of the easiest things for you to do is just sell a private lesson package. It's one of the most easy upsells. And the schools that do have these higher student values are looking at these different profit centers and asking themselves, not how can I make more money from my students? They are asking themselves, how can we provide more value? Okay. So your average revenue per student is a way to increase cash flow. Now, expense control, right? And this just helps to support overall profitability, and it's just keeping your overhead lean. I kicked off today's session with telling you about the 12,000 square foot facility, and because of that, our just expenses were so ridiculous. I mean, we had like 4 or 5 different air conditioning units that had to be constantly serviced, and we're in Florida, right? And those commercial units are like $10,000-15,000 to replace. So making sure that you are auditing. This should be, in my opinion, I am one of those, I look at my bank account every single day. And I have a finance day. It's the first of the month. If you look at my Google Calendar, it says finance day. It is marked as busy all day, so people can't book into my calendar, because one of the many things that I do for my end of month financials is I download every bank statement, every credit card statement. And here's a little ninja trick: I then sort it by alphabetical order. Okay. And when you sort it by alphabetical order, it gives you a better understanding of how much you're paying to a particular vendor, because you might see that vendor's name over and over and over and over again. And it'll also help if you might be paying for multiple subscriptions. So you need to make sure you're auditing these recurring expenses, software, just those kind of little things that can really add up. And more than likely, there is something that you can cut to help you with expense control. But I highly recommend making this a part of a monthly, time block session on your calendar. My kind of entire process takes me about 6 hours to go through all of the finance. And it's also going through, the marketing KPIs, the sales KPIs, all the payroll kind of stuff. But more than likely, there are areas where you can have expense control. And another area that we just don't look at very often is if you have been working, like maybe there's a specific place that you always get your printing done, right? Well, when was the last time that you just looked around to see, is there a more cost effective option? I always tell my team, if there's something that we need, I want to see 3 options. Give me 3 different options, go do your research, and then present 3 options, because from that research, more than likely, we're going to be able to save some money. Okay. So this is not just something we should be doing in our business. This is also something we should be doing in our personal life, but making sure on a monthly basis we're doing that. Another one that we don't think very much of about is staff productivity and utilization. Um, this was actually a concern. So I sold Gracie Pack back in January of last year. And the new owner, as he was he was on site more than I was. Towards the end of me owning Gracie Pack, I was really only on site maybe about 1 to 2 times a month for instructor training. And one of the things that he noticed is that we had assistant instructors coming in and the chief instructor coming in, and there were like three people coming in, I want to say at like 2:30. And we didn't start intros until 3. We had intros at 3, 3:30, and then classes started at 4. And one of the things that he noticed, and those instructors were supposed to be coming in to clean, tidy up the place, doing those things, is that they just weren't very busy. And because of that, he made the decision to cut hours. And it was something that I wasn't seeing because I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's completely my fault and I own that. But you need to make sure you're getting the maximum value from payroll and your team. And that might mean if you have assistant instructors and it's the last class of the day and half of the students don't show up, then you're cutting them early. I mean, that is a part of the decision you have to make as the owner to make sure profitability is where it's at. One of the best things that you can do is to have your team do time tracking. And that's literally just, hey, if you come in from 12 to 8, from 12 o'clock, we're just going to do it for a week because it is a little bit of a pain in the butt to do. But every 15 minutes in a spreadsheet, I just want you jotting down what you're doing because awareness precedes change. And if you do need to make some changes, you need to kind of have that data. That's why I always say math is the path. And doing some time tracking and time blocking is a great way to see where is your team spending their time and can things be adjusted. All right. So is our staff being as productive and are we utilizing them in the best possible way? All right. And for many in many cases, most of your team is not at 100% capacity. We recently did a survey of our team, and this was very subjective. It was not objective, right? The time tracking is objective, but we asked them, what's your capacity? And we had a handful of people say, yeah, I'm at about a 40 to 60% capacity. What do you think I was thinking here? I'm paying a full time US based salaried employee for them to tell me they have only 40 to like they're only 40 to 60% of their capacity is being used. What if I didn't ask that question? Right? Are they raising their hand saying, hey, we can take on more work? Are they not? Are they just milking it? Right? So staff productivity and utilization is typically an area that we don't really look at very closely that I would recommend doing that. Okay. We've done that. Now we use MIT's most important task. Currently, hours changed to have 2 admin days, 3 customer service days for master instructor assistant working much better. I love that. Okay. Again, awareness precedes change. So you're not going to know if this is an issue unless you really look at what does the day to day look like, do some time tracking, and then time block what you want their day to be. Okay. Next up is cash timing and collections. And this really just helps support all of your profit centers and improve your operational health, but making sure the money you are owed is being collected efficiently and predictably. And this means that, hey, if a credit card doesn't go through, that yes, somebody needs to pick up the phone and call them. And of course, there's automated messages, emails, and text messages that you can send, but sometimes that's not enough. I also know that there are schools that only bill on certain days of the month. I think this is a personal thing, but I want to be able to have money coming into the business. I want that cash flow every single day of the month. I know some only like do they do all their charges on the first of the month, or they do their charges on the 25th of the month, and then they just prorate it, right? So if maybe somebody's starting on the 15th, well, we're going to prorate what the charge is on the initial charge, and then on the 25th we'll do the full charge. I'm really just not a fan. I like the concept of being able to make money all day every day, and even while you sleep. And believe it or not, there are schools that don't have students on auto pay. We have a dance studio right next to Gracie Pack. It's called Center Stage, and they were there many years before we were. And when I first kind of moved in, I noticed that they put this sheet of paper on their front door. In the beginning of every month, it was like clockwork. Every single month, there was a sheet of paper that they would put on the front door. Any guesses to what that sheet of paper said? It said, "Please remember to pay your tuition," because they didn't have people on auto pay. Man, were they in a load of trouble when COVID hit. Oof. So I think for some of you, like you couldn't even imagine operating your business without auto pay. But believe it or not, there are plenty of schools out there that are still collecting checks or cash and having people come in. So just make it easier on yourself, right? So those cash timing and making sure we are following up with what people is owed. Um, I think there's a bigger conversation around should you send people to collections. Me personally, I have never done it. I understand the reasoning behind it, right? You signed a contract, there was a commitment. In today's world, sending people to collections, affecting their credit score. Again, like I said earlier, I want you to be able to put your head on your pillow at night and feel really good about the decisions you made. And that just didn't sit right personally with me, but I completely understand why somebody would. So potentially that could be part of this process as well. Okay. And then finally, just making sure you have revenue diversity. And this is the money that is coming outside of tuition. And when I first started working with Maya, one of the kind of light bulb moments, or I don't know if I really believe this moments, was when I was taught that your tuition should only be 50% of your top line revenue. So that means if you are billing $10,000, right, on tuition auto pay, you should be bringing an additional $10,000 in through this kind of concept of having revenue diversity, which is, whether that's birthday parties or parent night out events or seminars, private lessons, camps, after school programs, retail sales. Those are all different examples. And, the schools that we have really seen go good to great are the ones that aren't just looking at tuition as their, only way of bringing in revenue. They're looking at those other profit centers like upgrades and retention and retail and special events. Okay. Scott and Nathan, we used to do that as well. Switched to Stripe auto payments last year and said, great, great. Glad you were able to do that. Okay, so those are your 8 cash flow drivers. Let's talk about 5 fast moves to drive cash. Okay, so these are things that you can immediately do. I am not suggesting that you do all of these. It depends on your situation. First one is to raise rates. And, what should your price be? The answer is whatever the market will bear. Okay. And I know I was really hesitant in raising rates. I think a lot of schools only look to raise rates, if they are doing it, maybe every 5+ years. I mean, guys, look at your Netflix subscription, look at what you paid last year and the year before that and the year before that. Everything is slightly going up. I know schools that build this into their agreement that at the end of every year, no matter what, tuition is going to be going up a certain percent. I believe there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. Whether you should do it or not, there are many factors. Are you already on the higher end of whatever the market will bear? When was the last time you did this? I think let me keep it real for me. Have any of you ever, give me a yes or a no, have you ever had any fear around raising your rates? Any fear around raising rates? Yeah, right. Same thing too. And every time I have raised my rates, what I have thought afterwards is, why in the world did I not do that sooner? Okay, so potentially a fast move for you to drive more cash would be to raise rates. However, I do think you should be offering more value, right? It shouldn't just be, hey, we haven't raised rates yet this year, so we're going to do it. It's, well, or have you updated the facility? Have you added more, services or options? Have you hired more staff, right? So it shouldn't just be, in some cases, it might just be just because you haven't done it in 10 years. Okay. But you really need to ask yourself, what will the market bear? And am I Am I giving that much value, right? Rachel said yes, but no longer. I did, and then I ignored it. Good. Do you raise current students or just the new students? You can do it. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no black or white answer. Um, Many schools will do it just starting with like kind of like I think the tiptoe way of raising rates is I'm just going to do it on new students that are incoming. If you are selling programs when it's time for them to renew, they should renew on those higher tiered prices, right? So maybe they were on a 12-month and now the renewal is coming up, whatever the new price would be. But there's also ways to offer, hey, I'll keep you at your current rate, but I want you to sign an extended agreement. There's no right or wrong way, but I think the easiest way for most entrepreneurs to ease into raise rates are just doing it for the new students. And not the best way, but it is the easiest way. Your second move to drive more cash is just stop the unnecessary discounts. Man, I think when I first started, great. And it's just because you don't know what you don't know. I was offering like 50% off for like the second sibling. And like I got 3 kids. I don't go anywhere where they're like, yep, it's cheaper for the second one or cheaper for the third one. Like when I go to the, Airheads trampoline arena, they're not giving me a discount for multiple children. I think it's just, part of us is we want to have as much impact. We know the power and transformation that can happen in a martial arts school. So we want to help as many people, but you do only have a certain amount of spots. When you go to McDonald's and you order 2 Happy Meals, you're not getting a discount on the second Happy Meal. Okay. So stop unnecessary. Oh, P&Os. That was another one. I would discount the second sibling for a parent night out. It's not like it's not necessary. It's just not necessary. We're trying to help as much as we want, but you should be stopping unnecessary discounts. Number three, cut obvious costs, guys. And that goes back to, one of the levers we need to be pulling and just being very consistent in looking at what are we actually paying for. Number four, past clients. This is, or past students. This is one of your biggest assets that isn't on your balance sheet. If you are not doing a reactivation campaign at least twice a year, highly recommend. You could get away with doing this quarterly. Okay. If you're losing 5 students every single month, for some of you larger schools, you might be losing 10 students. That's literally over 120 students a year that you can go and reactivate. You already paid for the cost of acquisition. Reactivating them isn't going to cost you anything else. Okay. So really look at when's the last time you sent a reactivating campaign. And then finally, just eliminating waste. And this just goes back to that productivity. Maybe you have assistant instructors that are working 6 hours, and the last 2 hours, they're really just not producing enough to justify it. Okay. So you don't rise to the level of your dreams, you fall to the strength of your systems. And hopefully, I gave you some ideas today on how you can increase that. I put together this little cash flow driver scorecard. So it's got the 8 different cash flow drivers, and it's got a description of each one. And you could just score yourself like 1, I'm kind of weak in this area. 3, we're doing okay. 5, we're strong, and then focus on the areas that you are weak. It'll give you a breakdown of what your score means and just a little area for an action plan there. So I am going to drop that. I know I think we're right about on time, but do we have any questions on the 8 cash flow drivers? Any feedback? I'd love to hear it. Drop it in the chat for me while I grab this. Oh, that is not the right thing. I'm going to grab the sheet for you guys. Any questions? This was really informative. Gave me some things. Thanks for everything. No worries. Great info. Very cool. Awesome. Okay. We do have one more training, or I guess I should say, I do have one more training today happening in an hour with Mr. Mike Metzger and Mikey Dillard. We are going to be doing the 30K in 30 days. I know a lot of you have been on it. If you haven't been on it, you can go to 30kstudents.com. and we'd love to see you on there. It's completely free. We're just trying to help the industry here. It's a challenge of trying to get 30,000 new students signed up over the course of 30 days through all of you amazing schools. All right. We will get the replay sent out. And as always, if you have any questions, appreciate everybody's time and attention. Make it great. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.